My name is Alina, and this is the story of how I was born into a family that believed I was destined to be nothing. Growing up, I was never the favorite child, never the proud example, never the one anyone looked at with hope or admiration. Instead, I was the girl they tolerated, the girl they mocked, the girl they never truly accepted. From as far back as I can remember, my parents compared me to my brother, reminding me again and again that I wasn't smart enough, confident enough, successful enough, or worthy enough to be recognized. My father would always talk about achievements, respect, and reputation, but when it came to me, he would only shake his head with disappointment as if I was some permanent stain on the family's honor. My mother hardly ever defended me. Instead, she would sigh and say I was too weak, too emotional, too slow for this world. Relatives laughed at me in family gatherings, making jokes about my future, pretending it was all harmless fun, but each word they spoke was like a needle piercing deeper into my heart. My brother? He was everything they worshipped. Charming, successful, confident, and loud. He walked around the house like a king who owned everything, while I learned to fade into the background like a quiet, invisible servant who just existed to fill space. When something went wrong, it was my fault. When something bad happened, I was blamed. When something good happened, I didn't exist. Slowly, my world stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a prison built from expectations I could never meet and mistakes I never even made. I started believing that maybe they were right. Maybe I really was useless. Maybe I was truly born to be less. I began staying silent more often, avoiding arguments, avoiding dreams, avoiding hope, because hope hurts the most when life keeps crushing it. I would spend nights staring at the ceiling, trying not to cry too loudly so no one would hear, wondering why I was born into a place where love was something you had to earn instead of something you were given. I watched the world outside grow and move, while I stayed trapped in the same emotional cage every single day. I became good at hiding pain behind forced smiles, good at pretending I was okay, good at convincing myself that this was normal, that this was life, and that I should be grateful even to exist here. And then, right when I had silently accepted this miserable version of myself, life decided to remind me that destiny always has its own timing. Something unexpected was about to enter my life, something I never saw coming, something that would slowly uncover the truth buried beneath years of lies, humiliation, and silence. It all began the day my brother proudly announced that he was getting engaged, and the day his fiancée walked into our home, the day my brother's fiancée walked into our house. Everything felt different even before I understood why. The house was decorated. Everyone was smiling, laughing, celebrating his success like he was some gift from heaven, while I stood quietly in the background like I always did, making sure everything was perfect without being noticed. When she entered, she wasn't loud like our family, she wasn't arrogant, and she didn't behave like someone desperate to impress. Instead, she carried herself with calm confidence, the kind of presence that makes a room feel quieter without saying anything. Everyone rushed toward her with excitement, showering her with love, respect, admiration, and endless compliments, the kind I never received even once in my life. I didn't feel jealous, but I did feel something break again inside me because it reminded me how differently people treat you when they believe you are someone important. I was introduced to her like a formality, just a quick mention of my name as if I was a small, unimportant detail. I smiled, said hello softly, and as usual prepared to disappear into the background again, but she didn't look away like the others always did. She looked at me properly. Her eyes stayed on me a second longer than normal, as if she noticed something no one else ever bothered to see. Throughout the day, as everyone kept laughing and talking, my family started doing what they always did whenever outsiders came, using me as a joke to make themselves look superior. They laughed about how lazy I was, how I never did anything good, how I never succeeded at anything, speaking about me like I wasn't even a human being sitting right there. Every insult felt familiar, like an old wound being reopened again and again, and I just sat quietly, forcing a smile because silence was the only shield I ever had. But she didn't laugh. While they mocked me, she watched not with pity, not with confusion, but with a strange seriousness, like She was trying to understand why a family needed to break one child just to glorify another. Later that evening, when the celebration slowed and everyone relaxed, she came into the kitchen where I was working alone like always, washing dishes, cleaning up silently, doing what I always did best, existing quietly. Instead of ignoring me like everyone else, she stood beside me, gently helped without making it obvious, and started talking to me like I mattered, like my presence actually meant something. She asked about my interests, my life, my past, and every word she spoke was calm, soft, respectful. At first, I hesitated because when you're used to being treated like nothing, kindness feels strange, almost unbelievable. But the way she listened, the way she truly paid attention felt different, like she wasn't just hearing me, she was seeing me. And I didn't know then, but that small conversation wasn't just a conversation. It was the beginning of something powerful, the beginning of a truth that would soon expose everything my family spent years hiding, and the moment that would slowly start changing my fate forever, or the very first time. A few days later, when everyone gathered in the living room again, my parents proudly talking about my brother's achievements and future plans like they always did, I was once again sitting quietly on the side, invisible as usual, until something unexpected happened. My brother's fiancée kept glancing at me, not in a strange way, but like a puzzle she was slowly solving, and then suddenly she said my name out loud in a calm, steady voice, making the entire room fall silent. Everyone turned toward her, confused, because no one ever stopped a conversation just to talk about me. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and certainty in her eyes and asked, "Wait, is this really you?" My family frowned immediately, as if she had mentioned something ridiculous. My brother laughed casually and said something insulting again, like he always did, trying to remind her that I was just the failure of the house. But she didn't laugh. Her expression didn't change. Instead, she leaned slightly forward and said something that shocked every single person sitting there, including me. She said she recognized me, not as the useless girl everyone claimed I was, but as someone she deeply admired without ever knowing her identity. She revealed that for a long time she had been following powerful emotional writings online, words that healed broken people, gave strength to the hopeless, and touched thousands of hearts. She said there was a girl who wrote from pain, from depth, from unimaginable strength, someone whose words had once even helped her through a dark time in her own life, and that girl was me. The room went completely silent. My parents stared at her in disbelief. My brother froze, the arrogance on his face fading into shock, and I just sat there unable to breathe properly because I had spent years hiding that part of me. I had written anonymously, shared my soul with the world silently, pouring out emotions I could never express at home, and yet no one in this house ever cared enough to know. But she found it. She valued it. She recognized it. She told them I wasn't weak, I was strong. I wasn't useless. I was gifted. I wasn't a burden. I was a voice that had helped more people than they ever had. Then she looked straight at my family and said something that felt like justice. If you can't see her worth, it isn't because she doesn't have any, it's because you never tried to look. In that moment, the walls of lies my family had built around me for years began to crack. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet shadow. I was someone important, someone seen, someone finally defended, and that moment was only the beginning of the storm that was coming next. After that shocking moment, the air in the room became heavy, like everyone had suddenly forgotten how to breathe. My brother tried to laugh it off and call it an exaggeration, but his voice no longer sounded confident. My parents' expressions changed from pride to confusion to discomfort, because for the first time someone from outside the family had challenged the reality they created about me. My mother tried to defend herself by saying they always cared for me, but my brother's fiancé calmly replied that caring wasn't about food, shelter, or forcing perfection. It was about respect, attention, and love. She said ignoring a child's existence is worse than punishing them, and pretending they don't matter leaves scars that never heal. Her voice was gentle yet firm, and every word she spoke hit like thunder, exposing years of emotional neglect they had covered with excuses. I kept sitting quietly, but inside me, old memories started to wake up. The nights I cried silently in my room, the times I questioned my worth, the moments I wished I could disappear because invisibility already felt like my life. For years I convinced myself I didn't deserve attention, but hearing her speak made me realize I wasn't the problem, my family's mindset was. My brother, who always acted superior, suddenly looked small, threatened not because I was weak, but because someone had finally recognized my strength. That night didn't just change how they looked at me, it changed how I looked at myself. For the first time, a spark of self-respect lit inside my chest, and I silently promised myself that I would never allow anyone, family or not, to treat me like I didn't exist ever again. But I didn't know that this realization was only the beginning of a much bigger storm that was going to flip our entire family's world upside down. The days after that conversation didn't just pass, they echoed. Every word my brother's fiancé said kept replaying in my parents' minds, and for the first time in my life, I could see uncertainty in their eyes whenever they looked at me. My mother suddenly started asking me if I needed anything, not because she cared, but because she was scared of how she now looked in front of others. My father, who barely ever spoke to me unless it was to criticize, began forcing short conversations, trying to act like a normal parent, but every attempt felt awkward and artificial, like someone trying to fix a broken vase with invisible glue. It wasn't love. It was guilt mixed with fear. And guilt never brings warmth, it brings tension. The house, which once felt like a place where I was silent and invisible, now felt like a battlefield where everyone carefully watched each other. My brother became distant and irritated. He didn't like losing control over the narrative he had built for years. He was the successful one, the favorite child, the golden pride of the family. And I was the shadow they never acknowledged. But now, that shadow had a voice, a presence, a meaning, and that terrified him. Meanwhile, his fiancée started visiting more often, not because of him, but because of me. She talked to me like I mattered. She asked about my dreams. She insisted I deserved opportunities. No one had ever asked me what I wanted before. I wasn't used to being asked about my life, so at first, I didn't even know how to answer. She laughed gently and said, "That's okay when life never lets you dream. You forget how to. We'll start small." And for the first time, instead of being told, "You can't," someone told me, "Why not?" That little difference felt huge. Slowly, I began helping her with her work, showing her things I quietly learned over the years, skills I developed silently, because speaking wasn't allowed, but learning was something no one could stop me from doing. She was amazed, shocked, proud. And when she praised me, my mother flinched, because every compliment towards me exposed the years they wasted treating me like nothing. My father pretended to ignore it, but his uncomfortable silence said everything. But when truth begins to surface, it doesn't only bring healing, it also brings resistance. My brother slowly started poisoning our parents' minds again. He would say that she was overreacting, that I was trying to gain sympathy, that some people stay failures no matter how much you help them. And my parents, desperate to return to their comfortable lie, slowly started believing him again. Not because he was right, but because accepting they ruined their own daughter required courage they didn't have. So instead of changing themselves, they tried to change the situation. They became stricter, colder. They wanted me back in silence. They wanted the old, powerless version of me. But something inside me had already awakened, and once you discover your worth, you can never go back to being invisible. My brother's fiancée noticed this tension. She could feel the pressure on me growing again. So one day she held my hand and said, "Listen, you don't need their approval to exist. You don't need their permission to shine. Your life belongs to you." Those words didn't just comfort me, they set something on fire deep inside my soul. And as that fire grew stronger, something else was secretly building in the background, fate preparing to reveal truths my family thought would stay buried forever. I didn't know it yet, but soon something was going to happen, something that would expose who truly cared, who truly loved, and who only cared about pride, status, and image. Something that would prove that destiny always has its own plans, and no lie, no manipulation, no emotional neglect can stay hidden forever. Because when life decides it's time for the truth, it doesn't whisper. It shakes everything. Then one day, everything began to change in ways none of us expected. It started quietly, almost unnoticed, like a storm building somewhere far away while everyone pretends the sky is still clear. My brother's wedding preparations officially started, and suddenly the house that once ignored me was filled with music, laughter, relatives, decorations, everything except genuine happiness. Everyone was busy, everyone was excited, and everyone acted like life was perfect. But beneath that shiny surface, there was tension, ego, insecurity, and hidden truth swirling around, and I was right in the center of it. I was expected to help, to work, to smile, to stay silent, to remain the background character, while the golden sun enjoyed attention and admiration. That's how my family wanted it. But destiny had already decided something else. His fiancée stayed close to me during preparations, and every time she saw me being ordered around like a servant instead of a sister, her expression changed. She didn't like it, and for the first time in my life, I had someone who not only saw the injustice but wasn't willing to let it slide. She asked my brother why I was always given the hardest tasks, why no one ever appreciated me, why I was treated more like staff than family. My brother tried to laugh it off again, pretending it was family humor, pretending I was too sensitive. But she didn't smile. She looked at him in a way that made him uncomfortable, and I could tell cracks were forming. Cracks in the perfect image he tried to maintain. Cracks in the lies my parents built their comfort on. Cracks that could no longer be ignored. Then something happened that turned those cracks into fractures. One evening, she needed help with some important wedding work, something detailed, something professional, something requiring skill. Without thinking, she asked me to help. I agreed quietly, thinking it was just another favor. But what I didn't realize was this moment would change everything. I worked on it carefully, patiently, pouring effort into every detail because I had always lived my life that way, invisible but still doing everything with heart. When we finished, she just stared at the result. Not shocked, not confused, speechless. Then she smiled a different smile, a proud, emotional, meaningful smile. She called my brother. She called my parents. And when they came, she showed them what I had done. Their reactions were unbelievable. My brother froze. My mother blinked multiple times like she was trying to accept reality. My father stared silently, as if for the first time he was seeing something that destroyed years of fixed beliefs. And then she spoke. Calm. Confident. Strong. She said, "This is not the work of a useless girl. This is not the work of someone you call a failure. This is talent. This is intelligence. This is capability. And you never saw it because you never wanted to." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was powerful. It carried truth, and truth never needs to scream. Everyone went silent. No excuses. No fake laughter. No arguments. Just silence. The kind of silence that only appears when reality hits too hard. My heart was racing. Not because I wanted praise, but because for the first time, someone fought for me. Not secretly. Not gently. Not quietly. But openly. In front of the very people who always made me feel like I was nothing. For the first time, I wasn't invisible in my own house. For the first time, I wasn't just the daughter who failed. I was a person. A capable human being. Someone worth acknowledging. My brother didn't like it. I could see it in his eyes. His pride was cracking, his control slipping, his ego shaking. He tried to downplay it again, tried to call it luck, tried to dismiss it, but this time his fiancée didn't let him escape. She looked straight at him and said, "No. Stop. You've taken enough from her. Not anymore." And in that moment, I realized something truly important. Sometimes, it doesn't take an entire army to change your life. Sometimes, it just takes one brave soul who refuses to let injustice continue. One person who says, "Enough." One person who looks at you and sees your worth when even your own family refuses to. That realization didn't just warm my heart, it strengthened my spirit. Because now I knew I wasn't weak. I wasn't worthless. I wasn't a failure. I was simply unrecognized, unappreciated, unloved. And that wasn't my flaw, that was their blindness. But fate wasn't finished yet. This moment was powerful, but it wasn't the climax. It wasn't the biggest truth. Something far greater, far more shocking, and far more life-changing was still waiting ahead. Something that would not only reveal who truly loved me, but also expose just how far people can go to protect their pride, even at the cost of someone's life. As the wedding days moved closer, the tension in the house grew heavier, even though everyone pretended everything was perfectly normal. Relatives laughed, music played, decorations sparkled, but beneath all that glitter there was something dark and fragile holding everything together: pride, ego, and fear of truth. My brother's fiancée treated me like family, like a sister, like a human being who mattered, and that kindness became something dangerous in my house. Dangerous because kindness exposes cruelty. Dangerous because attention exposes neglect. Dangerous because love exposes the absence of it. My parents started feeling threatened, not by me, but by the fact that someone finally saw what they never wanted anyone to see, the way they had treated their own daughter all her life. They didn't like being questioned. They didn't like being judged. They didn't like being seen as anything less than perfect parents. So instead of accepting the truth, they slowly began to resent her for opening their eyes. My brother was the most restless of all. For years, he had lived comfortably with the idea that he was superior, successful, unquestionable, that he was the center of attention, that he was untouchable. But now, suddenly, a spotlight was shining somewhere else on me. Not because I demanded it, but because I deserved it. And for someone who always needed control, that felt like losing power.
His tone changed.
He became harsh, impatient, easily irritated. He snapped at his fiancée. He argued with her more often. And every argument had one hidden root: me. You care too much about her. You're overreacting. You're ruining the mood. That's what he would say. But she wouldn't back down. She wasn't the kind of woman who bowed down to injustice, even if it came from the man she was supposed to marry. One night, things escalated. I was in my room when I heard raised voices downstairs. Not playful, not casual, real anger. I walked quietly to listen. My brother was shouting, frustrated, his voice cracking with ego and insecurity. He accused her of disrespecting him, of interfering too much, of trying to fix things that didn't need fixing. And then, like a storm breaking, she finally said the words that shattered everything. They may be your parents, but what they did to her is wrong. And if you cannot accept that, if you cannot even acknowledge the pain your own sister has lived through, then what kind of man are you? Those words didn't just challenge him, they cornered him. Because he had no answer. He didn't want to face the truth. He didn't want to accept that the boy praised all his life might actually be standing on the foundation of someone else's tears. The silence after that argument was louder than any scream. After that night, the atmosphere changed completely. He stopped pretending. The fake smiles disappeared. The perfect golden sun mask slipped. He started ignoring me more openly. Not just ignoring, disliking. As if my existence itself was an accusation he wanted to erase. My parents quietly stood with him, not because they believed he was right, but because it was easier than accepting they were wrong. I watched everything quietly. Not crying. Not begging. Not explaining. I had spent my entire life chasing their approval, but now, for the first time, I wasn't desperate anymore. I had seen what real respect looks like, and once you experience real respect, forced affection feels empty. But destiny wasn't done yet. Just when everything seemed tense but still under control, something unexpected happened. Something that brought everything to a breaking point. My brother's fiancée received some important work-related documents one day, and when she opened them, she realized they needed certain professional records and information from my brother's side. Something about financial details, something official, something important enough that it couldn't be ignored. My brother became unusually nervous about it. He kept delaying it, avoiding it, acting strange. She noticed. And when a woman like her notices something, she doesn't stay silent. Slowly, she began to realize that the man she thought she was going to marry wasn't exactly the man he pretended to be. And that discovery didn't just involve him. It involved the entire family. And soon it would involve me. Because sometimes life doesn't simply expose emotional truth. Sometimes it exposes secrets so big that they tear everything apart. That mysterious tension around those documents didn't fade. It kept growing like a shadow that refuses to move no matter how bright the light becomes. My brother, the man everyone proudly called responsible, confident, and successful, suddenly became restless, irritated, and strangely defensive. Every time his fiancée gently asked about the papers, he would either change the topic, get angry, or walk away. At first, she tried to be patient, assuming maybe it was stress, maybe he was just busy, maybe there was some simple misunderstanding. But patience turns into suspicion when silence becomes too loud. And his silence was screaming. She finally decided she couldn't just blindly trust anymore. Not because she doubted him completely, but because marriage isn't built on secrets. It's built on honesty. And she wasn't about to walk into a lifetime with unanswered questions. One afternoon, when everyone was busy with wedding arrangements, she quietly sat down and began going through the required work again. That's when she noticed something odd, a small inconsistency in his provided details. Something that didn't match. Something that didn't make sense. A number that should have been stable wasn't. A record that should have been clean wasn't. Her heartbeat quickened. Not because she wanted to find something wrong, but because something was wrong. And when truth calls, brave people don't look away. She decided to verify the information properly. Not secretly to ruin his image, but silently to protect her own future. Because a marriage without truth is not love. It is a trap. Days later, she returned with clarity. Not relief. Clarity. And clarity sometimes hurts more than confusion. She discovered that my brother wasn't exactly the successful, stable man everyone believed him to be.
He had debts.
Serious debts. Financial instability. Reckless mistakes hidden under layers of pride and lies. He wasn't independent like he claimed. He was struggling, pretending, performing an image just to keep his ego alive. But the most shocking part wasn't that he had financial problems. Everyone struggles at some point in life. The real shock was that my parents knew. They knew everything. They knew long ago. They helped hide it. They protected his pride. They kept pretending everything was perfect just so their golden son wouldn't lose his shine in society. They never questioned him, never confronted him, never held him accountable. They just kept lying. And me, the daughter who never did anything wrong, the daughter who quietly survived, the daughter they labeled as failure all her life, was actually more stable, more responsible, and more grounded than the son they worshipped. Her hands trembled as she held that truth. Not because she was angry at his financial problems, but because she was heartbroken by his dishonesty, by the deception, by the manipulation. She trusted him. She respected him. She defended him. She believed in him. And in return, he hid the most important truth about his life from her, expecting she would walk blindly into a marriage built on secrets. She felt cheated,
Betrayed.
disappointed, and she felt something else too. Protective. Protective of herself. Protective of her future.
Protective of me.
Because suddenly everything made sense. Why he always needed to keep me beneath him. Why my parents never wanted me to shine. Why they were so threatened when she encouraged me. They didn't want anyone to see that the failure daughter wasn't actually a failure and the perfect son wasn't perfect at all. Their entire pride was built on illusion. And illusions break the moment truth walks in. That evening, she didn't explode. She didn't create drama. She didn't scream like my family would have expected. Instead, she went quiet.
Calm.
Controlled. Because real strong people don't create chaos, they create clarity. She came home. She sat alone for a while, thinking,
Processing.
deciding. And then finally she chose to confront reality. But here's the thing about truth. Once you choose to face it, you must be ready for the storm it brings. Because the confrontation that was about to happen wasn't just going to question my brother. It was going to question everything my family ever believed about themselves. And I had no idea that I was about to be dragged into the center of it in a way that would change my life forever. That night, everything finally came crashing down. She gathered my family in the living room. No drama, no shouting, just truth. She placed the documents on the table and looked straight at my brother. Her voice was calm, but her words were sharp. She told him she knew everything about the debts, about the lies, about the fake image he had been maintaining for so long. My parents panicked. My brother tried to deny it. He tried to twist the truth, like he always did. But facts don't bend when they're written in ink. And for the first time, he had no escape. Then she said something that shook the entire house. She told him she wasn't angry that he had problems, she was angry that he hid them. She said marriage is built on honesty, not on reputation or ego. And then she turned toward my parents and said something even harder to hear, that they were equally responsible. Because instead of teaching him accountability, they covered his mistakes, fed his ego, protected his pride, while crushing mine. And then she said it. I don't want to marry a lie. Silence. My brother's pride shattered. My parents were stunned. Their perfect world collapsed in seconds. Years of fake superiority disappeared. There was no golden sun anymore, just a grown man exposed for his irresponsibility. No one spoke. No one moved. Only truth stood there, shining brighter than any fake honor they ever tried to protect. And before leaving, she did something I will never forget. She walked to me, held my shoulders, and said, "You were never the failure. You were the strongest one here. Don't ever forget that." For the first time in my life, I cried not from pain, but from relief. After she left, everything changed. The house that once laughed at me now avoided eye contact with me. My brother lost his arrogance. His pride broke. His voice lost power. My parents were forced to face reality. The daughter they ignored was stronger, wiser, and more grounded than the son they worshipped. They tried to speak to me, to soften things, but this time, I wasn't the same quiet, invisible girl anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't insult. I simply spoke the truth. I told them that all my life, I just wanted love, respect, a place in my own home. But they chose pride over parenting, status over affection, image over their own daughter. And even if they regretted it now, the scars they gave me would always remain as reminders of who they chose to be. And then, I chose something different. I chose myself. I started focusing on my own life, my dreams, my peace. I stopped begging for their love. I stopped waiting for validation. I understood something powerful. Sometimes, family is not the people who share your blood. Family is the people who see your worth as, oh yes, my family once called me a failure. They laughed at me, ignored me, treated me like nothing. But destiny made them watch the truth. They lost someone amazing. Not my brother's fiancée. They lost me. And today, I am not the weak, silent girl they used to control. I am the woman who survived neglect, who endured humiliation, who rebuilt herself, and learned that sometimes you don't need to prove your worth to anyone. You just need to recognize it yourself.